All right, we are officially recording. So we will get into it. This section is really short, really brief, but just to talk a little bit about the organization that I am from. So my name is Brenisen Wheeler. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator at Women's Advocates, which is indeed the first domestic violence shelter in the nation. Over the last 45 years, we've learned so much about domestic violence. We've expanded our physical space to 3 Victorian homes that are all interconnected and located in St. Paul, Minnesota, where our mission is to walk with victim survivors and our family to break the cycle of domestic violence. We provide prevention and education services like these webinars. We also provide shelter to 50 women and children every day with various advocacy and support programs, as well as a housing program to help survivors find and maintain safe, sustainable, affordable housing for them and their children. Now that you know a little bit about me and about Women's Advocates, I'd love to know more about you all. So the next poll is about your professional position. So this will help me gear some of the content specifically to your work and different situations that you might encounter. So feel free to submit your response that best describes your position in the community. So right now, it seems like a lot of people are domestic violence advocates. Wonderful, that makes a lot of sense. We do have some social service providers and educators. Then a couple of others are saying their position is something else. Quality assurance, thank you. This question is really cool to me because it's interesting to see what topics bring different parts of the community together, because I think we absolutely all have a role in trying to address various issues like digital abuse. Okay, I'll give it 10 more seconds. For each poll, I typically give a minute for people to submit their responses. Okay, I'll go ahead and share with you all so you can see who else is on the webinar with you. But thank you so much for doing that. That's helpful for me to know. So many of the people who signed up for this webinar told me that they're interested in this topic because they know it's a thing, but they don't know much about it, and they especially find it relevant in the age of COVID. So the stats on the screen focus on teens and adolescents, those between the ages of like 14 to 24, because that is the age group that experiences and perpetuates digital abuse at a disproportionate rate. Like 1 in 4 dating teens are harassed through technology. So digital abuse is important to understand, not only because the impacts of it by itself are profound, but also because the majority of people who experience digital abuse also experience other forms of abuse from their partners. So I would like you all to engage in yet another poll about what terms you currently associate with digital violence at this point in time. Here we go. And again, for all of the polls, you can select multiple answers. So you don't have to just pick one. A lot of people are responding that they think of leaking private photos. 91% of us associate it with that right now. As well as harassment, cyberbullying. Yep. Okay, 5 more seconds and then I'll share the results with everyone. Okay, great. So you can kind of see what others are saying. So thank you again. It's important to understand what our current beliefs and conceptions and associations are with this, and hopefully by the end of this webinar it will have expanded just a little bit. Sorry if you can hear that, buses driving by. Okay, so in addition to teens, I also wanted to mention the use of technology to sexually exploit and abuse children. So nowadays, in the digital age, children's usage of the internet is extremely common. So 1 in 3 internet users worldwide is a child. When I read that statistic, I was kind of blown away by that as well. I know even when I was a kid, I wasn't using the internet until only for school purposes. So just really interesting to understand what that looks like right now for kids. And then another statistic that 750,000 individuals at any point in time are estimated to be looking to connect with children for sexual purposes. So we won't dedicate a ton of time on this particular subject because it could be an entire webinar on its own. So if you're interested in learning more about the online sexual exploitation of children, visit endviolenceagainstchildren.org or visit some of the resources that I linked at the end of the webinar. All right, so now getting into what exactly is digital violence or abuse. So we're going to talk about the warning signs and specific forms and themes in a moment here, but it's important to know that anyone can experience digital abuse and anyone can perpetuate digital abuse. Digital abuse is a form of relationship violence, but one does not have to be in an intimate relationship with someone to experience it, right? So digital abuse can be caused by a friend, a classmate, a coworker, a parent, a family member, a former partner, or a complete stranger from any part of the world. They could be anywhere, and that's what makes digital abuse so different from other forms of abuse. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to play a short 3-minute video. When you go to participants, you have this ability to raise your hand. So if you could raise your hand if the video is working well, it's only 3 minutes, but if it's just horrible on everyone's end, we'll just skip it, but I do want to try it out. So if you could all let me know, that would be really helpful. So here we go. Let's see, let me make sure I'm sharing my sound.
Basically, what digital abuse is it's any way somebody can use a cell phone or a computer to make another person's life miserable. So that encompasses things like cyberbullying, sexting, and digital dating abuse. And as we've seen through our research, digital dating abuse can often be a precursor to offline abuse.
If you have somebody in your life that is being very demeaning towards you, meaning they call you names or, give you a feeling of, that you're inadequate, say for instance, are you going to wear your hair like that? That dress really looks horrible on you. What were you thinking when you picked out those shoes? Just any kind of demeaning behavior like that.
So many of our girls say that they think it's romantic when a guy is constantly needs to know where she is, constantly blowing up her cell phone. That's a really dangerous sign of relationship abuse.
I think a telling one is how many of you text more than you speak on the phone. 98% of them are. It shows how young people, are digital natives, and I'm a digital immigrant. And as a parent, that's a frightening thing because it adds to the problems that we see. A child can be next to a parent in a car and being tormented by somebody through text and other venues.
Most important things is to be able to step away from your phone or step away from the computer. And it sounds so simple, and And yet when it's emotional and when you feel like you're talking to your friends and they've got a grip on you, and if that grip is negative, the most powerful thing you can do is just step away.
All right, I hope that that video went well for everyone. Feel free to type in the chat if it was horrible so I know in the future. But I'm gonna assume, since I'm not seeing everything, that it went great and you could all see that video. So I'm excited that that worked out. So 7 main warning signs that were also mentioned in that video include bullying, harassment, monitoring, stalking, sexual coercion, possessiveness, and control. As they mentioned in the video, many of these warning signs can appear to be harmless or are even romanticized. So digital abuse intersects with emotional abuse when the severity and impact of the harm is minimalized or trivialized because it happened on a cell phone or computer. If someone you know describes any of these warning signs to you, it's important to take them very seriously. Also, these icons were automatically generated by PowerPoint, so some of them fit really well, and this last one, I couldn't change it. So it looks kind of silly, but I do take possessiveness and control very seriously. Okay. So similarly to the warning signs, there are many common themes of digital abuse. So these are typically the intentions of why someone would use technology in a harmful way. Commonly in teen dating and even in adulthood, when you're dating or even married to someone, your partner could pressure you to do things that you're not comfortable with using technology. So they could either try to coerce you into something either sexual or non-sexual in nature, like coercing you to maybe post them and say that you're in a relationship with them on Facebook, or coerce you into sending, explicit photos of yourself, things like that. Control is really common from, anyone that you have any kind of relationship or friendship with. Control is a very common theme for parents or other caregivers, family members, and even friends as well too. So maybe they want to control who you communicate with. Maybe they're controlling who's on your social media or who's in your contacts, or controlling who you're able to text or call. Another theme could be degradation. So it could be, someone who you thought was a friend and they're using social media to either spread lies or degrade you or belittle you, or maybe write really mean, hurtful comments on different things that you post that you care about or they're about you. That's also common for exes as well. So ex-partners to try to make fake accounts and use it to degrade their ex and someone that they were in a relationship with. Another theme is embarrassment and shame. So again, that can be anyone using that to either post personal information to the public or share something embarrassing that you thought they held in confidence, as well as threats and manipulation. So we see that very commonly in schools where they would say, oh, that's my ex, and they're threatening that, if I don't send them a picture or if I don't get back together with them or different things, then they'll, share my information or do something using social media to manipulate me to do whatever they want. Isolation is really common too. We see that with cyberbullying, with friends trying to isolate them. So maybe they don't have friends, or making everyone in the school unfollow them. Just a lot of different ways to create that sense of being alone and isolation. So those are common themes, and I encourage you all to kind of think about how those themes could have come up right now during COVID. So especially if someone really wants to practice social distancing, especially with online dating and things like that right now, they could use technology to try to pressure someone to meet up with them in person or do things that they're not comfortable with. So I think bringing in that current cultural context is really important too. So a little more about how digital abusers go about causing that particular form of harm. So there's a lot of different types. So one of them is stalking. So according to the US Department of Justice, stalking is a pattern of behavior where unwanted attention, harassment, contact, or conduct causes a reasonable person to feel fear. So that is their definition of stalking. And technology assisted stalking involves the use of smartphones, GPS, social media, video and audio recording, or other devices to monitor, intimidate, and control the victim. So that's one that is really common. And I think a lot of these different types of digital abuse are now being depicted in very popular shows. With stalking, a lot of people immediately think of the show You on Netflix. And that kind of plays into what that video was talking about, of romanticizing certain things, of wow, this person really cares about me. They went out of their way to follow me, or to make sure that I'm the only person that they're talking to. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Another form that's really common, again, this could also be parents, right? Relentless texting and calling. So abusers restrict their victims' ability to interact with others or go out much by bombarding them with endless calls or texts and demanding communication. So often a victim has to answer the phone on the first call or immediately read and respond to texts, including requests for pictures to prove where they are or risk being punished, right? So when we do trainings at places that provide hair services, so say a salon, a hairstylist might say, oh my gosh, yeah, I see this all the time, where I have to talk on the phone to someone's abuser and try to convince them that they're actually getting their haircut and that they're not somewhere else. So that's a huge indicator of control and possessiveness as well, right? So another one is monitoring, control over social media and communications. So this is a huge one, and you would have seen in the statistics from the very beginning that I think it's at 36% of teens that are in a dating relationship have reported that they've shared their passwords or have given different access to their social media or to their phones or different things to the person that they're dating. So abusers often require that their victims provide total access to all forms of their communication with others. So it's not uncommon for an abuser to bar their victim from having social media accounts. But if they do have social media accounts, abusers often demand the passwords to access direct messages and review their activity and their friends lists. An abuser may also force their victim to give them access to their email and read all incoming and outgoing messages. A lot of them might even have their email on the abuser's phone. So to make sure that their victims are not hiding anything, they can also audit calls and texts on the victim's phone against the tracking list on an online account history. So discovering any call or text records have been deleted may prompt punishment. So some people might say, oh, we'll just delete our text thread or just delete a call. But if they have access to the records through maybe a cell phone company, then they can still access that as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Another that people might not think as much about is video and audio recording. So it might not always be a device that's in the form of a cell phone. So regardless of whether or not the victim has granted permission to be recorded or photographed, the abuser can use images, video, and audio as a way to control or punish their victim. So these recordings can also be used as a leverage to shame the victim into an abuser's demands to prevent them from sharing the files with others, which we see in the media quite frequently. On a similar note is revenge porn. So that's the last one we'll kind of talk here about the types. So it's important to know it is a couple's right if they choose to record and photograph intimate acts, but it's not without peril, right? So doing so requires each partner to have explicit trust that each other will not violate the other by sharing the images with anyone else. So even in different shows and just popular media culture that we consume, we see, typical scene of like guys in a locker room passing a phone around, like, oh my gosh, look at my girlfriend, or look at this girl, and they're passing it around. And so that is a very common form of that as well. And it's not uncommon for victims to either be coerced or manipulated into sending these things, or they might not even know that they're being recorded. So someone might set up a camera in their bedroom without letting that person know, and not obviously getting their consent. So some partners exhibiting toxic patterns of behavior might post intimate images of someone online to get back at them during a bad breakup. That's really common. In cases of domestic violence, an abuser may share such images with others without their partner's knowledge during the relationship, again, maybe to humiliate them or for other reasons. After a victim leaves an abuser, the abuser will send threatening messages telling their victim that they've already, sent this out maybe to hundreds of people. So regardless of the context in which this occurs, it is an abusive, calculated behavior that's used as a way to cause profound humiliation and shame. All this information, I got it from this source on the top here. So if you're like, oh, you said something that was really interesting about revenge porn, you can look at that link and see all of the information that I just pulled. Okay, so we're gonna go along. I know I was talking for a while there, and do one more poll here about different terms just to understand more about what you are interested in learning, because I know I just covered a lot of it, but there's some things that might still be missing or some terms that might be new to you. So I want to make sure that those get addressed. So again, I'll give everyone a minute just to submit their votes of what they would want to learn a little bit more about, and then I'll spend a little extra time on that one and then allow you all to browse the resource to learn more about any of the other terms. Okay, so it looks like a lot of us are saying doxing, so I'm going to go ahead and start talking about what doxing is. So doxing is when someone searches for and publishes private identifying information online in the effort to scare, humiliate, physically harm, or blackmail another person, right? So the information that they could post could include your name, address, phone number, email address, photos, finances, maybe banking information, your family's names, other things like that. So an abuser may already know this information about you, or they may look for your information online through different search engines or social media sites to figure out where you live and post your address. Sometimes they may even reach out to friends or family pretending to be either the victim or a friend or someone to get more information about that person. So the abusive person may publish the information online just to either scare, humiliate, harm, or blackmail other people. So it's a common tactic of online harassers, and an abuser may use the information that they learn through doxing to pretend to be that person. So another form, people have probably heard of the term of like catfishing. So posting, maybe creating a dating profile with information and names and pictures that aren't of that actual person, it's of someone else. That would be a form of doxing. So they have more information on this website about impersonation. And there's different laws that talk about whether doxing is a crime or not in the state that you reside in. But the behavior may fall under stalking, harassment, or criminal threat laws as well. So that's something to look into. If you start to see profiles about you and you didn't create them, that's another form too that a lot of people don't know about. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. I'm not seeing any questions yet. Okay, so the next one, it seems like, I'll go ahead and end the poll. Okay, so it looks like threats and cyberstalking are the next one. I'm gonna go ahead and do cyberstalking because I think that is one that people get a little confused about, like what does that actually mean? So for cyberstalking, it's the misuse of the internet or other technology to stalk and harass someone. So they may contact by email, social media, a messaging app, or other online spaces. So they may post messages about that person or share their personal information some stalkers may use technology to find their location. So that's something too of, and you'll see it in the later slides about some safety tips of making sure that there's a bunch of settings on your phone that a lot of people don't know about. Of, you post a picture on Instagram and it has like the location of either where that picture was taken or where you currently were when you posted it, and you have to go out of your way to undo those settings a lot of times. So different things like Facebook, sometimes it will like automatically check in to a coffee shop you go to or other places, and then people are kind of being notified of where you're going and where you are. So that is an example of, kind of using online methods to stalk another individual. And it's also like a common phrase of saying like, oh, I Instagram stalked that person, or I I like Facebook stalk them, or I just like type their name into Google and try to learn more about their life and look through every person who liked their pictures and their comments and different things. And I think there is a line you have to kind of think about this for yourself of, it's not wrong to, maybe your friend requested someone and they accepted it, and you look through their pictures, like that's kind of why they posted them there, so other people can see it. But it kind of gets down more to what is the intention and what are you using that information for? Are you using it to, build a stronger friendship with them? Or are you using it to stalk them, right? Or to monitor what they're doing, or just having malicious intent with that. So I think that's important to mention as well. If you're interested in any of the other terms, I'll let you all kind of explore those, so we can kind of move on to more specific examples. So go ahead and stop with sharing the results. All right. So I'm not going to read through all of these, but these are just examples, and I mentioned a lot of these before too, but it's important to know what that looks like in real life, because I can say these buzzwords of like coercion and control, but these are explicit examples of what people actually do every day toward others. And this is specifically about digital dating, but I think that you can pull from each of these examples and see how they could be applied from people of all ages, all different kinds of relationships and connections to one another. So I'm going to pause here quickly, see if there's any questions. If you do have a question, please send it in the chat or send it Q&A, but if I don't see any pop up, I'm going to assume everything's making sense and we're doing well. Okay, so next poll. This one is about a specific case. So my question is, have you heard of the Michelle Carter case before? Because we're going to talk about 2 real life cases, just to contextualize it and learn more from that before we jump into some more info, because I think it's important to know a little bit of how this shows up. And these are a little more severe cases than the everyday cases, not to minimize those. So it looks like the overwhelming majority of us have not heard about the Michelle Carter case. And for those who have, maybe you could help, send in your reflections or different things that you've thought about since you've been exposed to it before. So I'm going to go ahead and end that. Okay, so great. We're going to move on. So the Michelle Carter digital abuse case, this happened in Massachusetts, and this was in 2014. So not too long ago in the scheme of things. But Michelle Carter, she was 17 years old. This was in Massachusetts. She was dating this boy named Roy. He was 18 years old. And this case, basically they're saying, is she encouraged him to complete suicide through digital means. So she sent him hundreds of text messages encouraging him. Some of the background information is that he kind of was experiencing depression and had a history of having different mental health concerns. And she used that, weaponized it to convince him to end his life. So she went as far as to say exactly how and when and where to do this. I should have added a trigger warning about suicide. I'm so sorry. And she was on the phone with him when he filled his car up with dangerous chemicals, and heard him take his last breath and neglected to call the police or tell his family or tell any adult of what he was doing. And the case itself resulted in Michelle Carter being in jail for 15 months. So that is kind of the overall higher level with not a ton of details about what that case was. And so my prompt is kind of for all of us to think about, you know, why, I don't even know what my question is. It's kind of like, how can the impact of these words and text really have on another person? I did not explain that very well. But also, if this happened to someone that you're working with, how would you help them? Not necessarily. So maybe at the beginning stages where, you know, a client that you have is, you know, dating someone who is sending these threatening messages or encouraging them to do harmful things to, you know, end their life. So what would you do? How would you support them? And again, on the screen, it kind of talks about not using the spaces really to argue or to kind of think about who's to blame for it, but really just understanding that the role that was played of the digital violence, you know, how powerful it can be. She wasn't in person with him. She wasn't, you know, I don't want to get too like graphic, but you know, she was over the phone. So that's something to really think about, the impact that can have, and how this probably wasn't just like an isolated event, right? So it said hundreds of text messages. So that was probably over the course of many, many months, if not years. I'm not sure how long. But thinking of how that continue to compound maybe the pre-existing, and even if there's no mental illness present, you know, that's bound to really impact someone, especially coming from someone who's supposed to really care about you. So feel free to add anything in the chat if you have any comments about that case. If you're surprised to hear about it, I was too. But yeah, if you have any, and then we'll have more advice about tech safety and how to connect people to resources. But if anyone wants to share anything right now, you can. Okay. Well, we have one more poll for the last final case study that we're going to discuss. So this is called the Juan Thompson case. Okay, so it looks like a lot of us are saying no, we haven't heard of it. And I hadn't heard of it before I assembled this PowerPoint as well either. So we're going to be kind of discussing it together here. So I'm going to end that. Great. Okay. So the Juan Thompson case, and this isn't teen, so I wanted to provide two perspectives. So a lot of people, when they think of different forms of violence, especially with like physical, they think, oh, the male is the perpetrator, the female is the victim. And that's not always the case. And so that first one with Michelle Carter kind of showed, you know, a woman being the perpetrator of the violence and the man in that situation being the victim. But this one happens in, you know, full-blown adults, 32 years old. This happened in New York. And this is a case of cyber stalking. So people who want to learn more about what cyber stalking really is, this is a novel example of what that is. So with that, you'll see this happened in 2016, so more recent than the Michelle Carter case. But this involves so many of the different themes that we've already discussed and touched on. So Juan Thompson sent his victim's boss, so it was his ex-girlfriend, sent her boss threatening emails, claiming that she possessed child porn. He sent several community centers hoax bomb threats in her name, sent her threatening texts posing as her ex-boyfriends, texted and emailed her death threats, posted her personal information online. So those are all examples of things that we already talked about manifesting in a real case. And then this is a quote from the victim. So I won't read the entire thing. I'll kind of pull out different aspects of it, but I'll allow you to read that yourself. But used so many different forms and different methods and different types of social media as well. So different things like news outlets, different Tumblr pages, maybe saying that she had STIs, and talking about any person that she's ever dated. Even went as far as to using YouTube as a channel to create videos about her and posted them. Created fake personas. It went beyond phone calls and emails and texts, which are really common, but every digital platform imaginable. Venmo, Google, OkCupid, Facebook. And then you start to see that impact of how living through digital abuse can, really make you associate your phone with harm, right? So she says every time her phone buzzed, she panicked. So then she started to associate that with, what else is he doing? What else is he saying about me? So again, another example of doxing. There's a website that was known for hosting child pornography, posted her picture and home address and phone numbers. So there's a lot here, right, to unpack. And at the end of it, she really thought that he was really out to destroy her career, her entire life, all of her relationships, and she truly feared for her life. So that can really show that the truth in no one form of violence is more serious than another. A lot of people say, oh, where are the bruises? Where are the marks? Where are the broken bones? But when you read the story, like, it's very evident to someone like me, and probably a lot of people like you, advocates, that would read this and say, yeah, absolutely, that is terrifying. You have no idea what this person is going to do. So that's something to keep in mind of those impacts, and how it can be really painful, especially from someone that she was in a relationship with. Okay. So another kind of prompt, and it's okay, I know it's Friday, we're all kind of tired, so I won't push you too much to try to interact, and it's okay if you're kind of just soaking it in, taking it in. But if this was happening to you, what would you do? Or how could you talk about what was happening to others around you? Maybe even thinking if that could be really scary, and it could feel really shameful to say, oh yeah, I'm really terrified of my ex-partner. And really talk about how it's impacted you, like mentally, physically, financially, socially. So I think that it's important to know that these cases happen quite frequently. These are only the ones that have gone to court. So imagine a lot they kind of just want it over with. And there's a lot of we have more resources about, getting harassment restraining orders and different protections that can be afforded to someone who's going through a situation like this. But just wanted to contextualize it to some current events. Okay. So a lot of you have probably heard of the power and control wheel. There's a power and control wheel for a lot of different forms of violence and different components of it. And one of them is social media. So I didn't include the wheel. There's a link to the wheel if you want to look at it, but it was a little difficult to see because there's a lot of information. So I just grabbed all the different themes and put them in this slide here. So again, I won't read through all of them. I want to just focus on the ones that are kind of most important and most pressing for you all. So I'll go ahead and start this poll. You can select which forms you want to learn more about that we feel like we haven't touched on or talked about too much this far. I also want to briefly note that I did notice a typo in the webinar, that it is 90 minutes. Most of the webinars are 90 minutes for June. So this will be ending at 2:30. So I completely understand if you have to sign off before then. But again, this is being recorded, so you can always go back and rewatch the last 30 minutes. But I'll make sure we have some time for questions, and then maybe even end a little early. We'll see how it goes. Okay. So I'll give everyone maybe 10 more seconds to submit their answers, but right now it looks like a lot of people want to know more about using children as pawns. So we'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit more, and how that happens, because we did mention like child exploitation a little bit in the beginning, but that does come back to play of, if it's not even a child explicitly experiencing it, it could be someone using a child in this way. So using children to relay threatening messages to the partner. So that is a really, really common way. And that could be through text. It could be using technology, right? It could be, texting them nonstop saying, oh, like tell your mom if she doesn't do this or that I'm going to do that. And that can be really scary to put, literally put a child in the middle of that, and maybe use their phone as that way. They could also, use children, maybe put a tracking device on the child's phone. So when the child is with the other parent, if there's like a divorce custody situation, so then they can know where the other parent is. That's really common. Or they might tell the children negative things about the partner, about the other parent. They might hurt or threaten to hurt a child. So that can be used in any of those other themes, right? So they may try to coerce their ex-partner or their current partner, even by saying, if you don't do this, I'm going to hurt our kid, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to kidnap the kid or take the kid away from you. Those are really common threats. Or they might threaten to report another parent to child welfare or immigration officials. Again, not just two parents can be using children. Children could also be used by someone who's not a parent, right? So it could be anyone who wants to blackmail and have leverage or do something. They can involve children in that way through digital means. So hopefully that explained it a little bit more and made more sense. The next one that people wanted to learn more about is using privilege. So that's really relevant to our current society right now, of course, but also with social media, it can be used in a way of perceived inequality in the relationship to assert authority. So they might say, oh, like in teenagers, right? They might say, I have more followers than you. And so that means I know more about social media. That means I should monitor everything that you're doing because of this privilege that I have of, either being an influencer or having a bigger platform or different things that could be used as justification. Again, gender, race, or socioeconomic status could be used to justify for the harm. So they might say, oh, it's really normal for everyone in my family to like have each other on Find My Friends. So because we're dating, I think that we should have each other on Find My Friends, and I should be able to look up where you are anytime and confirm that you're telling the truth about where you are. So that could be an example, or it could be even a gender thing. Some guys saying, oh, I don't trust other guys. So that's why I need to have passwords to your account, so I can make sure and check these guys. So then there's just like a lot of different examples of this that I've heard in working with students in schools. It could also be restricting or withholding access to assistance or services for a disability. So maybe if your partner is deaf and one of their main forms of communication, especially during COVID, is using their phone. If you hide their phone or withhold it or say, no, you can't access it, or maybe you don't tell someone else, tell your deaf partner that someone called, that's using your privilege as a hearing person to not let other people know that they're being contacted. Or even exploiting immigration status, so maybe using the privilege of saying, well, you're not a citizen, so you're not allowed to have a Facebook account, because then they'd be able to find you. But really they're saying, you can't have a Facebook account because I want to control and isolate you so other people don't know about your whereabouts and you can't connect with others. So those are some examples of using privilege. Maybe we'll do one more. It looks like the next one is, I'm going to end the poll so you can all see, so I'm not just deciding myself. So the next one is peer pressure. That one's really, really common, right? So we've already talked about peer pressure for when it comes to partners, but it could also be justified of saying, oh, you should send me a photo, of you in a bikini or in your underwear or different things because, Brad's doing it, everyone else is doing it. So you would be really weird because everyone in our class or our age or our school is doing it. It could also be like, you know, saying that, I forgot where I was going with that, but another example is being charming and generous with the partner's family or friends, or glamorizing the relationship using social media. So then they encourage the partner to stay in that relationship. So they might post a ton of stuff about them. They might say, oh my gosh, she's my queen, or he's my king, or they're my everything. Wow, that rhymed. And posting different gifts that they got for that partner, or saying, wow, look at me, look at how great our relationship is. And like maybe tagging their family or taking pictures with their family and kind of controlling and isolating them so they feel manipulated and having to stay in that relationship because everyone that is friends with them on Facebook and Instagram and social media knows that that relationship is amazing and that the partner is so supportive. So that can be another example of peer pressure. Even if the peers aren't explicitly saying like, oh, you have to date him, they might be saying, oh, look at all this stuff online. Like, I can't believe that this person would treat you poorly because look at your online relationship. Another could be pressuring a partner to not express their sexual orientation. So maybe there's biphobia in their relationship, and the person is saying, I don't want you to put a pride flag or a bi flag or different things in your bio or in your profile. I don't want it to be visible. So they could be kind of pressuring you into how you're presenting yourself online and what you're sharing with people. So that is another example as well. Does anyone have anything that they want to add? I was trying to see if, maybe we'll talk about economic abuse very, very quickly because I think that's important. So lastly, for this slide, pressuring a partner to engage in sexual acts, including the internet, for the abuser's financial gain. So there's a lot of different platforms and different things that people are willingly on, to share different photos or share different things in exchange for money. But it could be something that they're being manipulated into doing against their will. So that would be an example of economic abuse. It could also be threatening to withdraw financial support if, the partner or whoever doesn't obey them. So they might say, you have to post a picture of us every week, or talk about how much you love me, or I'm not gonna buy us dinner, or different things. So there's a lot of different threats of like using the intersection of money and economics with social media. It could also be not allowing the person that they're dating or whoever it is to go to work or school, or using social media to sabotage their performance. So maybe they're calling the office every hour and the boss is saying, oh my gosh, why are you taking a personal call every hour every day? That could have negative impacts on their employment, right? It could also be something for their reputation. Maybe it's something that, a lot of people keep work and their personal life separate, so maybe they violate those boundaries and they friend all of the victim's coworkers online and are telling them private things that they didn't want their coworkers to know. So that's another example too. And I think when we're talking about age, it's also really common for older adults. So for the elderly or just other populations, maybe in a nursing home, not giving, a lot of finances are online right now, right? And so sometimes older adult victims of digital abuse won't be given the password to access their own finances. So that's another form of that intersection as well. Okay, hopefully that made sense. I don't see any questions. Okay, so now we're gonna get more into like, what do we do about this? How do we make sure this doesn't happen? How do we help, right? So this section's kind of talking more about that. So this talks about your digital rights. So this particularly is for, relationships. And it's a good reminder of saying, everyone has the right to be able to turn off their phone and spend time with themselves even without someone else getting angry. So it's not always just a partner, it could be a friend who is really possessive or feels as though they are entitled to contacting you and reaching you at any point at any time that they want. Also a reminder that everyone has a right to say no to sexting or, sending pictures or information digitally to the partner that they're not comfortable with. You have a right to keep your logins and passwords private, the right to control your own privacy settings on social networking sites, and the right to feel safe and respected in your relationship, online or off. I think that's like the number one thing too. And some people might be hesitant to say, oh, what you're doing makes me feel unsafe, but I think that it's important to acknowledge that impact, that it can make someone feel like they aren't safe or comfortable or able to do the things that they want to do on their own phone. So I think that's a useful tool about digital rights. We talk about that in schools. So when we go to middle schools, high schools, colleges, and we talk about dating abuse, we say, know your rights. These are things that you are allowed to say. Some people don't even realize that. They're like, oh, I didn't know, like I could tell my partner these are my boundaries, or tell, even me personally, sometimes I would tell my family, I love you and I love talking to you, but if I don't text you back right away or I don't call you every day, that's okay. And so they kind of know what to expect from me. So that's just one example. Okay. So similarly about boundaries, this is something that whoever you're working with, you can encourage them to talk to their partner about their online relationship. And it can be kind of awkward. Maybe you're not really sure. Maybe you have different responses to these questions, but I think being on the same page about this is really important. So these are some questions that you could encourage yourself to kind of explore with your partner or different people in your life, or someone that you're working with who, might be struggling with digital boundaries or feeling obligated to respond to every message they receive immediately. So maybe saying, is it okay to tag people in pictures or to check in certain places? Do we post, on Facebook? Everyone knows about that, of this person is now in a relationship with this person, and if they do that behind their back or without a conversation, make sure that they know, is it okay to do that? Is it okay for me to share that with not only my network, but also your network, because that person's being tagged? Also, is it okay to friend or follow the partner's friends? When is it okay to text? What are the expectations for when to return them? Is it okay to use the other's devices? I think that's a big one that people don't talk about a lot. And I even see, in my own personal life with people that I observe of, oh, maybe you're in bed and, you need to check the time or something, and you roll over and your partner's phone is closer to you and you look at their phone and maybe, oh, you see a message or something, or, oh, can you look up directions to get to this place, and they're using their phone. So maybe just everyone has different boundaries and their comfort level, and that's going to depend on your relationship with that person, but that's something important to think about as well. And then again, similarly with like posting, tweeting, commenting about their relationship, just knowing, are we on the same page about that? What are you comfortable with? What's your comfort level with that? That conversation can be really helpful to making sure that those boundaries aren't being violated. Okay. These are some other reminders. So similarly to the last slide, again, anyone, not just your partner, anyone should respect the boundaries, especially digital boundaries. Same thing with privacy settings. So again, I'll have a link at the end where you can look. I did this even when I was researching this. I went on my phone and turned off a ton of location services. I didn't even know how many apps were collecting data about where I was going. So I think that's important to just do in general, even if you're not worried about digital abuse. That's just something to know as well. So again, you can feel free to read through this after, but I just want to make sure we have some more time. Looks like we're going to wrap up early too, so that'll be great. We'll have time for questions. So this is again the impact. So before we talked about very severe impacts of digital violence or digital abuse, but all of these are really important too and are interconnected with someone's mental health. So things like embarrassment or shame, that can happen a lot of a result. And if you watch any show now, I'm sure you can kind of see any of these themes. They'll show up in some way, shape, or form. Or just look at and evaluate, different people in your life. A loss of self-confidence is really common too. If someone is bashing you on social media and it gets, thousands of likes or a bunch of other people comment insulting you or saying really harmful things, that can really take a hit on your sense of self, and that can intersect with other mental health concerns you may be dealing with. Same thing with sadness, feeling like we are all social beings, so feeling connected to other people is really, really important. So you might experience sadness, or someone that you're working with might be really sad, or they might be really anxious. So again, like that story, Juan Thompson, his victim described, anytime my phone rang, I was anxious that it was something that he was trying to do to destroy my life. So that's another thing to be aware of. Loneliness, isolation. Even a lot of artists, famous artists, have spoken out about, photos being leaked or other things, and people saying horrible things about them, and them feeling so alone, so ashamed, isolated, that, no one cared about them. If you watched Unbelievable on Netflix, this even came up there too, and that wasn't the main premise. The main premise was about sexual assault, but the repercussions of digital violence that did end up happening intertwined with that resulted in her feeling so isolated, and it was really, really devastating for her to feel like she was completely alone when the whole world was talking about spreading lies about her and saying horrible things. Another way that can impact is difficulty sleeping or concentrating at work, or having a negative body image. So and that's really common. Some people say that's the maybe ugly side of social media, is sometimes social media can be used to really promote self-love and kindness, but others it can be like, well, why don't I look like that, or what's wrong with me, how come I can't wear that or do things like. So there's just a lot of different body shaming that happens on social media, so that's something to be aware of too. Drug use, like as a result to try to cope with the repercussions of experiencing digital dating violence, or digital violence in general. So we kind of talked about those, but those are really profound ways that digital violence can impact someone. Okay, moving on to prevention. So there's a lot of different prevention tools and models out there, but one of the main things that you can do right now, of course, is always just watching your own behavior on social media and how you use your phone. If you catch yourself doing something harmful to a friend or anyone that you're interacting with on the internet, try to stop that. It's as simple as that. Just being aware of, maybe through all the different things that we've done, you may have said, wow, like I wasn't in the best relationship, and because my partner cheated on me, or because of this break in trust, I engaged in some of those behaviors because I was scared and I didn't know what else to do. That's totally valid, but I think recognizing that is the first step for sure. Similarly, if you notice a friend or someone else doing something harmful, maybe just talking to them a little bit about that, and saying, you can even use this webinar and say, hey, I watched a webinar on like how you can have detrimental impacts on someone by using media, and kind of engage in a conversation about that too. And then another way prevention is sharing this presentation or presentations like this, and any of the resources that I'm going to link at the end. And also for us at Women's Advocates, continuing to go into schools and start dialogues about this, because that's pretty much where it starts a lot of times, is in middle school or high school. When you get a phone for the first time, you're kind of trying to figure out, and you might be trying to resemble what other people. So if everyone else around you is engaging in digital violence, you might think that's the norm. So hopefully other adults and then other people and educators can kind of be in that space to say, hey, actually, there's a healthier way of engaging with people online. Okay. So just a few more tech tips for a healthy relationship. So again, discuss the comfort levels, find that happy medium. There might be a compromise that has to happen. A reminder that information is not owed. When you're in a relationship with someone, you might feel like, oh, I really care about this person, and I want to know about what they're doing. But that you're never really fully entitled to that, and it's up to that person to decide whether or not they want to disclose that. Another one is healthy relationships have boundaries. So again, not just digital boundaries, there's a bunch of other boundaries too, physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, and there's a lot of worksheets and things to help you with that. Another reminder is that the internet is forever. I know that's one of the main things we kind of say to kids to kind of scare them, but especially nowadays, there is a lot of censorship. But once it's out there, again, as you all know, people can screenshot it, people can save it. And there might be copies of that in other places that you might not even know about. So that's just one thing to remember. And then guilt tripping isn't good either. And then there's this link about is my or that relationship healthy? So there's a quiz that you can take to learn more about that. So just wanted to add it because it seemed relevant. Okay, so we're gonna finish up here with some tech safety. So again, I won't read through all this, but I do want to point out a few things. These are some safety tips for someone who has already experienced digital violence. So these ideas of like creating a new email or changing your password to social media, changing all your passwords to any other accounts, disabling geolocation apps, maybe avoid using old computers or phones if possible. And then there's also this app through Tech Safety, through NNDEV, and it's called DocuSafe. So it's an app that can help document and share evidence of abuse. So say that someone is experiencing, like with that Juan Thompson case, or even with the Michelle Carter case, they're victims. Sometimes you want to just delete things because it's so horrible you don't want to see it. But you can put it in this app to store it. So if you do end up deciding that you want to try to go for a harassment restraining order, you'll have all the evidence you need to say, hey, look at what's happening, and storing it there instead of, having to have it on your phone all the time or worrying about it getting deleted or different things. So that's one thing to note. There's 2 resources on this page. So at the top, there's resources for tech safety for people who have already been victimized. And then there's also a women's law page about tech abuse. So to learn more about those state definitions and what would constitute as cyber stalking versus not. So if that's relevant for anyone that you're working with right now, I highly recommend that you look into that and utilize those resources. So similarly, we have a lot of different resources. So even on our youth trifold, we have a safety tips section dedicated to cell phone safety tips. And then this is just, I always add this because it has a resource hub of a bunch of different things, including some of these links that I'm gonna put on the screen. Oh. Okay, here it is. Oh no. Okay, so these are more tech related resources, so feel free to go through all of those. There's a lot of different blogs, different things about parenting, about the involvement of parents, what parents need to know, how to promote safe and healthy online communities. So there's a bunch of resources here. I recommend that you all check it out. So we did get closer to that 60-minute mark. So if you all were anticipating on only being here for 60 minutes, hopefully I met that need. So I do want to open up for any questions that you may have. I know it's a little briefer than the other webinars so far this month, but I think it covered a lot of bases and the basic knowledge of what digital dating violence is, dating violence in general. Again, as a reminder, after this, in a few moments here, I'll send out an email. When you close out of the webinar, you will be directed to a post-webinar survey where you can share any feedback about the webinar. It really helps us to continue to improve the webinars and also report to people that maybe fund us or maybe will fund us in the future that this is important for the community to know about and for advocates to be aware of and have access to this education. Again, you'll get a form to request a certificate of attendance. I'll put that link in the chat right now. Okay, so this is the link to request a certificate of attendance for coming to this webinar. You'll get the survey when you log out. I'm going to send a bunch of resources in the email, including the registration link for the other 4 webinars. So the last 4 webinars are on family violence on Monday. Wednesday is breaking the cycle, so more about prevention, more about how different forms of violence are interconnected. And then another one, the third one, is on engaging youth specifically in violence prevention, youth-based efforts, youth-led efforts. And then the very last one is about PTSD and domestic violence and the impacts on the brain. So if you're interested in any of those, we'll have a registration link, but I'll send it in the chat too. And then a copy of all of the PDF of the slides will be sent as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.